Welcome back to the show. It's Wolf and Luke on a Thursday afternoon. We're all happy. Cardinals have Budda Baker for at least 3 more years.
So cool.
Would assume his teammates are pretty happy, too.
It says so much when an organization goes out and re-ups a guy that plays the way that Budda Baker plays once again. Now, he's one of the best safeties in the National Football League. I understand that. But it's more about how he plays, the example that he sets for every player, whether you're on the field, whether you're on the opposing team sideline, or whether you're in a meeting room. Watching Budda Baker play the game of football, you've heard me say it many, many times, it is beyond inspiring. It truly is. And it challenges you as a man when you watch him go about his business. Because the question hangs in the air. If he's willing to play like this, why don't you play like that?
If you look now at even just the last, I mean, it hasn't even been 2 full years, but since Monty Ossenfort and Jonathan Gannon, Nick Rallis, and Drew Petzing got here, I mean, they got here and they were immediately, obviously, Jonathan Gannon's the defensive guy, Nick Rallis, they were like, yeah, we want more of that guy, right? But when they first got here, you know, the Cardinals were coming off a really rough season. It wasn't a great culture. Yeah. And Budda there was even rumblings like Budda was like, hey, maybe I should be leaving, you know? So you said this earlier. It takes both sides to make this work.
Yep.
I give Budda a lot of credit for sticking it out, and now things are getting better. And I give Monty Ossenfort a lot of credit for coming in and navigating that, especially, you know, a year and a half ago. You and I talked about this a lot. Like, you can't come in and make special exceptions for somebody if you're trying to build a culture, but at the same time, you can't let Budda Baker go if you're trying to build a winner. And that was like the first thing Monty Ossenfort had to do when he got here. So to be at that point then to where they are now, how often really do you hear a report out there that a star, like a superstar player, is asking to be traded? I mean, that was essentially what the report was, right? How often do you hear that, and then that player plays the rest of their career happily on that team? It almost never happens.
I agree.
Once you take the toothpaste out of the tube.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to think of, man, you're right on that, Luke. Wow, I didn't even think of that. But, man, it's stunning. I've never seen somebody do
can't think of one. I really can't think of one.
Somebody, please, let's put that out on the Twitterverse, shall we? Or the Xverse.
I remember that.
I got it, though.
Oh, you already have it?
Yeah.
Okay, who is it?
Kobe Bryant. If you remember, he asked for a trade, I believe, and then he stayed with the Lakers for the rest of his career.
Happily, too.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
Right there. Okay, Kobe Bryant. It's kind of a big one.
That's
okay,
pretty
but
good,
I was in the context of football.
Yeah.
I was in that context.
But I would take athletes from any of the sports, and the fact, I mean, Kobe's a good one, and I'm sure there are like 2 or 3 other ones.
Sure, of course.
But for the most part, like if you are a hardcore Cardinals fan, you remember where you were when that story came out. I just remember driving home from this show because I think it came out during Burns and Gambo.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing them talk about it as I was driving home. And I'm like, well, this isn't good. You know, you're bringing in, and you got to remember that was a bad time for the Cardinals. They were trying to pull out of it. You had just switched coaches and GMs, and you're just like, okay, I mean, do we really fault Budda for being upset at that point? No. But you kind of feel like, okay, even if they can make this work for a little bit, it's probably not going to be a long-term solution. Now he's signed for the next 3 years, and he's talking about how he wants to be here for his entire career. That is great job by everybody involved.
Yeah, I love that too. And I think looking at some of the other re-ups as well, you look at James Conner, of course, Zaven Collins, Yelda Froholt, these guys that have re-signed contracts. Mm-hmm. You think about it. Zaven Collins bypassing his 5th year. You know, they gave up. They said, we're not going to pick up your 5th-year option. Yeah. They still signed him.
Yeah.
Says an awful lot about Zaven and Zaven wanting to be here. It says a lot about the Arizona Cardinals doing the right thing business-wise. James Conner as well, Yelda Froholt, Budda Baker, now Budda Baker. Do you see any similarities between those 4 players?
Yeah.
Audience?
Yes. And as each of them signed, every time you were talking about it, you were always like, so does this mean Budda's next? Every time somebody re-signed with the Cardinals was like, so does this mean Budda's next?
Look at the way this has happened, though. It's kind of, correct me if I'm wrong here, but was it not Zaven Collins who signed first?
Yep.
And then it was Yelda?
Yep.
And then it was James Conner?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's Budda?
That's Budda.
You can see intelligence behind that.
Yeah.
You can see why they proceeded the way that they did right there. And now it's Budda Baker getting signed. And we all wonder, in the offseason, will there be a number 4? Will there be a number 5? Excuse me. Will there be Trey McBride?
That's the next one. His deal's up after next season. Here's Kyler Murray yesterday.
But you can sign him after this season.
Yeah. And you're going to need to sign him soonish. He's not signed forever, and he's not making much relative to other NFL players. Here's Kyler Murray yesterday on the Budda extension.
Well deserved. He's the best in the league to me, in my eyes. What he brings to this team. Can't really put a price tag on who he is and what he's been, the way he plays. I could keep going, but he's He deserves every bit of it, and I'm happy for him.
Wolf, also what you were saying earlier, if Budda is choosing to stay here, what does that say about the direction of the team? Kyler talked about that as well.
I think it says a lot. I think, for me, being around young guys now, I've ever been one of the older guys. Obviously, Budda, I think, is one of the oldest, and he's not even old, so I think we're on the right track, having the young guys, play longer here, building through the draft, and having guys that are invested in the organization, growing up, playing well, hopefully sticking here and continuing to keep that trend going.
Man, I'll tell you what, I'm pretty jacked up in regard to the secondary of the Arizona Cardinals and the future of this secondary right now. You got Jalen Thompson, of course, as the other safety. Rabbit. How well is Rabbit?
Dude, I'm all in on Rabbit. This is great.
Rabbit is developing beautifully. You got Budda Baker, and then you've got these 3 young corners that are developing in Max Melton and Star Thomas, Garrett Williams. Man, those 3 guys right there, the secondary for the Arizona Cardinals over the next 3 years looks really, really strong.
Yeah. I get that it's all about winning. I'm right there with you. Ultimately, you're trying to win a Super Bowl. That's ultimately the goal. But there are things that I would say they're not insignificant, right? That the Cardinals have done even just this season. Drafting the way they've drafted these 2 years with Monty Ossenfort, developing some of these guys, building a secondary that is not at full potential, but it's building certainly. Bringing back Budda Baker. I mean, if I'm a Cardinals fan, I want to see that Budda Baker is back. If you let him go, what sort of message does that send to your fan base? That sends we're still trying, but it's not going to be for another 3 or 4 years. That's the message it would have sent if you let Budda go. And they win home games now. I mean, these are things that I know that if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, you're like, yeah, big deal. We win the Super Bowl every year. But if you're the Cardinals, these were not givens until this year.
I kind of feel like, just listening to you talk right there in regard to what does it say to the fans? I also think, what does it say to the players in the locker room? By the way, we've got a culture here, and this is how we play the game of football. And you know what, guys? Just look at Budda Baker. Budda Baker is the guy. James Conner, the guy. Watch them play the game of football, and this is how we want you to play the game of football. Coach, why did you just let him walk out the door then?
Yeah.
Why did you let him do that? You're telling me he's the epitome? He's the epitome of what you want? This is our culture right here? And you just let him walk out the door.
That would not have been great.
That would have been bad.
And to a certain extent, it wasn't all under their control. I get that, like you were saying earlier. Yes. Like if Budda didn't want to be here,
that's
then
right.
What do you? But you're right. At the most basic level, don't overthink it. Just the most basic level, we want you to play like Budda, but we're not going to re-sign him. That is the definition of a mixed message.
That's right. But once again, the good news, it takes 2 to tangle, and Budda wanted to be here.
And they signed him.
Thanks for watching Wolf and Luke. Tap to see more and click the button in the middle to subscribe to Arizona Sports.